My 18-year-old daughter and I watched as my wife, Samantha, and my boss loaded her suitcases into his car. He had come by to pick her up on Sunday morning for a Monday meeting in New York. They were scheduled to fly out that evening for preliminary meetings before a mediation session. Even at 44, after 25 years of marriage, Samantha remained strikingly attractive. Standing at 5 feet 7 inches with black hair and piercing emerald eyes, she had put on a few pounds over the years but still retained her slim, curvy figure. We had married right after high school, and I worked hard to support her through university while studying online myself. Despite having 2 children, childbirth had left her appearance largely unchanged. After finishing law school, we moved back to be closer to family, and our daughter Emma was born in Samantha's first year of legal practice. As I faced him, I felt a mix of emotions, disliking the smug look on his face and his overly confident attitude. Though I was tempted to confront him, I restrained myself, recognizing he wasn't worth the effort. He and the woman accompanying him were off to settle a civil case. Little did they know, I was already aware of their secret plans. A call from a stranger named Rachel had tipped me off. They had declined our offer for a ride to the airport, choosing instead the convenience of David's car. It was frustrating not knowing when they would return. Physically, David and I were about the same, with only minor differences in height and age. Despite his good looks, I was ready for an equal face-off. Emma, sensing my thoughts, prevented me from making a scene, wisely shielding me from further embarrassment. We waved goodbye from the porch as Samantha likely anticipated an exciting time with her colleague David in the city. Samantha's promotion to associate partner at the firm 2 years ago had dramatically altered our lives, and not for the better. Power seemed to have a negative impact on her, a fact I alone was privy to. Rachel, David's wife, had reached out to me with details of his past infidelities, claiming this would be his final betrayal. They had set a trap for him, and once his car was out of sight, Emma and I retreated indoors. "Does Mom have any idea about what we know, Dad?" Emma asked. "Probably not," I replied. "She's always been blind to the truth, even with her legal expertise. Gossip about David never bothered her. She dismisses rumors, thinking she won't get caught up. To her, it's just a thrilling escape from our mundane lives. She'll be devastated when she realizes she's just another notch on his bedpost. And even worse when she faces the fallout." Emma looked at me seriously. "Why didn't you intervene if you knew? If I had warned her about the affair, she would have dismissed it as jealousy. It would have only led to a pointless argument. Once she's decided on something, nothing can change her mind." "Does his wife know?" Emma asked. "Yeah, and her father too," I replied. "They're prepared to catch them in the act. This isn't his first time. Rachel is well aware of his previous affairs. Her children are grown, so she's ready to end the charade of their marriage." "Will you forgive Mom?" Emma asked anxiously. "Not this time," I said. "I forgave her once, but now it's different. It's time to move on." Divorce was inevitable the moment she left. The image of my daughter's shocked face will haunt me forever. Discovering her mother's past infidelities must have been a heavy blow. "Dad, you have to explain," Emma urged. "I don't get it. You're the youngest, Emma, so let's keep this between us," I said. "Before you were born, your mother was unfaithful until she was visibly pregnant. If you weren't mine, would have left. Luckily, a paternity test confirmed you are mine." Emma's astonishment was clear. This family secret had been kept among only 3 of us for the sake of the family. "Who is he? Do we know him?" Emma asked. "It's been 18 years since I spoke to him," I said. "Your kids call him Uncle Daniel." Emma processed the revelation. Her father had always avoided events with Daniel. Her grandparents split Christmas between them and Daniel. Now it made sense why her father had distanced himself from her uncle. "Suggesting you text Uncle Daniel about Samantha's return and their hotel might stir up old connections," I quipped to Emma. I headed to the kitchen, brewing coffee and scanning the local paper for rentals and purchases. With Emma in university, Samantha could stay until she graduated. I needed to act before her return, knowing Judge Harris prioritized the children's needs, often leaving parents unhappy. Emma's phone rang, and she spoke quietly for a while. Uncle Daniel confessed to the scheme, she informed me later. He sympathizes with you and wants to talk. After 18 years, it seemed like it might be time to hear my brother's side of the story. Samantha's actions had made me reassess the past. Though I felt betrayed, I had stayed in the marriage for the sake of the children. Wanting to avoid a divided home, I grabbed a bottle of Jack and asked Emma to drive me somewhere. He was waiting for me at our old fishing spot on our father's property. As we shared the bottle, he recounted his perspective, which contradicted Samantha's version. It led me to believe the truth lay somewhere between their stories. Ultimately, the truth no longer mattered. His acceptance of responsibility was reassuring. I began to shift more of the blame onto my wife, considering Daniel more of a follower than a leader throughout his life. While we were intoxicated, our father stumbled upon us. Seeing our fire, he approached with a weapon, mistakenly thinking we were local teens. Daniel drove us back to the farmhouse in his truck. Mom whipped up a batch of eggs and potatoes to help us recover from our hangover, a familiar, comforting scene from our childhood. As we ate, Mom made phone calls to Emma and Daniel, wives. By the time they arrived, we were beginning to sober up. Laura, who had married Daniel after they separated, looked confused when she saw us all together. "All right, you're making amends," Laura said. "After all this time, we deserve to know what happened," I started to explain, but Daniel gave me a nudge, a familiar signal from our younger years to keep quiet. He was always better at spinning stories to get us out of trouble, but this time I was in the wrong. Daniel admitted that Samantha and I had an affair while she was pregnant with Emma. He took the blame for being immature and foolish. Since then, my younger brother, more mature, had seen me as a non-entity. Dad, hearing the truth about our rift, exclaimed, "Damn, if I were Mark, I'd take you out." "Why spill the beans now?" Mom asked. Samantha flew to New York with her boss, I explained. They only booked one hotel room for the whole trip, which seemed off. Rachel, David's wife, has private investigators on them. Emma is aware of their plans, and it's difficult for her to see her mother's excitement. Now she understands why I acted the way I did. "Should have let you confront him, Dad," Emma said, locking eyes with me. There was a pause before I continued. "Since Samantha is keeping the house while Emma's at university, I need to find a new place before she comes back." "I'm not staying with Mom," Emma declared. "Wherever you go, I'm going too." "We're sticking together." Emma was resolute, just like me, and meant what she said despite the consequences. "Emma, come upstairs with me," Mom said, and they went upstairs for a while. When they came back, they had decided we'd move in with them. For now, we only needed to pack our essentials. On the way home, Emma chided me, "You need to stop defending Mom. We're adults now." She knew exactly what she was doing with David in New York, thinking she wouldn't get caught. That says a lot about how she sees us. Back at home Monday night, we began the slow process of moving our things. Each of us picked out our favorite items: TVs, my rocking chair, and her makeup table with mirror. Samantha kept us updated throughout the week on the progress, which was slow. Rachel called, suggesting we meet on Thursday night at Logan's Roadhouse around 8. I showed up in work clothes, minus a tie, and spotted her by her white scarf. I introduced myself. She was strikingly beautiful, several years younger than me, with long blonde hair, soft blue eyes, and a slender, modestly dressed figure. Learning she was a decade younger and a kindergarten teacher explained her conservative look. I worked as an HR manager at a nursing home. Rachel revealed they'd be in New York for the weekend, having completed 70% of the settlement work. They'd be served with legal papers upon their return, and Rachel asked how I was coping. "This time is much better," I said. We talked it out openly, unlike the last time when it was all unintentional. My older brother was the first to know about it, more than 18 years ago, before my youngest child was born. We hadn't spoken for 18 years until last Sunday when we reconciled, thanks to my daughter Emma. She made us work together like we did in our youth, resulting in the worst hangover I've had in years. Rachel laughed, and I added, "What made it worse was our father catching us like we were teens and dragging us home." Rachel found this amusing but commented on the comfort of being with her parents. I told her that my youngest daughter and I would stay with my parents temporarily. I planned to keep Samantha's number active until Sunday, then block her for good. Before we parted, Rachel and I danced at a nearby bar. Despite everything, I went home in good spirits, only to be grilled by Emma, who seemed to know everything. The next day, as we got ready for the day, Emma kept teasing me, "Daddy's got a new girlfriend." We had a great Sunday dinner, and my parents were already feeling settled. It was special for my mother to cook for us again, and she was pleased we all ate well with little leftover. At 1 a.m., a call jolted me awake. Rachel confirmed that they were asleep when the hotel detective entered, with the whole event filmed by cameras. She sent me a temporary copy of the video. I got up, dressed, and went downstairs to make tea. My mother joined me as I finished making a cup. "Is the water still hot?" she asked. I got up to prepare her some tea. While showing her the video on my phone, I watched her expression change. Samantha and David were captured undressed under the sheets, their surprised voices clear. They looked like deer caught in headlights, suggesting their actions were far from innocent. Mom quickly saved a copy to her own phone. "We're done with Samantha," Mom said firmly. I enjoyed seeing the shock on her face when she was served with the civil suit. I told her that Emma and I had blocked Samantha's number, as we had been warned about the impending lawsuits. Mom took their phones, and I walked her through the process. Sharing tea with my mother in the middle of the night brought back warm memories. Later, I instructed the receptionist to block all calls from my wife, as I didn't want to speak with her. Around 11, the receptionist reported, "She's calling every 20 minutes. How can we stop this?" I asked. "What's your mobile number?" She gave it to me. "I'm sending you a video clip. If she tries to reach me again, ask her for her cell number. If she gives it, send her the video and let her know Emma and I got it last night. That was the last time I saw her that day." Before leaving, she confirmed, "I did what you asked." Once she got the video, the calls stopped. "If you or Emma need anything, just give me a call," I nodded in agreement. "Thanks, boss," she said. I kept this to myself while Mom cooked dinner and Emma helped out. I took the opportunity to brief Emma on the work situation. A text came through from an unknown number, which I quickly realized was probably from David. It asked me to call. "I think your brothers will contact us around 8 tonight," I said. "Your mother will try to reach them. They've probably already discovered we're gone. If they do, it'll catch them off guard." Emma responded, "I left a note for Mom, saying you'd be making David move out since his wife kicked him out." It's kind of amusing because I knew Samantha would never confess to our sons. "Hey, Dad, let's ditch our phones for a while," Emma suggested. "That way, my brothers will have to contact Mom to find out what's happening." So, we turned off our phones and enjoyed a quiet night, though it wasn't so peaceful for others. Later, we found out my sons had gone to our old home. They noticed my favorite chair was missing and searched the entire house. When they found Emma's note in the kitchen, it became clear that Emma and I had moved out. Their attempts to reach us went unanswered, adding to their frustration. Their mother claimed she didn't understand the note or our departure, and despite their best efforts, they couldn't track us down. Eventually, they reached out to Uncle Daniel, who hinted that perhaps I didn't want to be found given what their mother had done. This shocked them, and they didn't question how Daniel knew. In their efforts to find us, my sons spread news of the breakup faster than any rumor could. By the end of the workday, my secretary connected me with Ryan, my eldest. After the usual pleasantries, he cut to the chase. "What's up, Dad? Where do you and Emma live now?" "Not much has changed," I replied. "What was wrong is now right, and vice versa. Let's avoid religion, Dad," he warned. "Just give me the facts. Check your texts for what I just sent," I instructed. "That'll answer your question. Forward it to Ethan, and if you want to talk, come by Grandpa's place after dinner." With that, I ended the call, sent the video, and informed Emma of what I'd done. Within 10 minutes, Ryan responded, "Wow, I'll be at Grandpa's by 8. My parents excused themselves, leaving my kids and me to discuss our situation. We listened to their advice about my next steps. The boys didn't see their mother's actions as that serious and suggested I move on. We all make mistakes, Dad. Remember how many times you forgave us growing up?" Emma, however, was irate. "You may be my brothers, but you're both idiots," she spat. "It wasn't an accident. Mom and David planned this. The hotel room was booked for Mr. and Mrs. Harper, David Trescott, a week before they left." Watching the look on my sons' faces as Emma recounted the details was unforgettable. Emma continued, "We watched Mom leave that Sunday afternoon, knowing she was going to cheat. She had him pick her up, clearly anxious about what she was getting into. Dad offered to take her to the airport, but no, she wanted to flaunt it by leaving with him. We were probably the punchline of their jokes on the way to New York. She had no idea we knew, and didn't realize we saw through their act." Emma asked why I didn't intervene, and I explained, "She would have just lied and denied everything. Your mother's actions showed she was intent on leaving the marriage. This wasn't a mistake. It was all planned. Dad and I knew 2 weeks before she left," Emma emphasized. "David's wife warned us. That's why we had video evidence within an hour of them being served with the lawsuits." "Boys," I addressed my children, "you need to understand that your mother didn't just betray me. She betrayed all of us. I'm seeing a doctor tomorrow to get tested for STDs. All of you are shocked, but I'm doing this because I can't be sure she didn't have other lovers on the side. This might be the first time she's been caught, but her frequent business trips over the years raise suspicions." "Dad, you can't be serious," Ethan objected. "There's no way Mom had other lovers, given what we've learned. Can we trust your mother to tell the truth?" I challenged. "Facts are more important than the truth. If my test results come back negative, that will support your belief." When my children fell silent, I excused myself, saying, "I need to grab a coffee." My parents, who had been listening, agreed with my approach. "Mark, you're handling this wisely," my father said. "Considering her job and travels, it's plausible she had other partners. Business trips and mediations could easily provide opportunities. Even if she had separate numbers, calls between them can't be ruled out. In a world where one truth can be another's lie, I can't take her words at face value," I added. As my phone rang, I stepped out onto the veranda to take the call privately. "Hi, Rachel." "What's going on?" Rachel recounted her conversation with David. "I had a talk with him," she said. "The conversation didn't go as smoothly as hoped. David couldn't fathom why Samantha was seeking a divorce and insisted she should just move on. But when Samantha made it clear she didn't want him involved in our daughter's life, David began to grasp the gravity of the situation. He was utterly clueless about the harm his deceit had caused. With Samantha now unemployed and struggling, they wouldn't return until Thursday to deal with the fallout. I blocked her number for both Emma and me and instructed the receptionist to reject her calls. When Samantha begged me to stop the calls, I forwarded her the video Rachel had sent. Now she knew we were onto her. It must have been difficult for her to lose control like that. Rachel had informed David that his belongings were in the garage and that the locks had been changed. I wanted to see his reaction to the disruption. I also had a heart-to-heart with my kids about why I was getting tested. "Do you really think your mother would admit to other lovers if there were any?" I asked them. Emma and I were taking things one step at a time as we moved out. We wrapped up our conversation, wished each other good night, and I went into the kitchen where everyone was waiting for me to speak. "I'm taking tomorrow off," I said. "I have a lawyer's appointment at 9. I want those two served with lawsuits as soon as they're back on Thursday." Tears welled up in my son's eyes as the gravity of the situation sank in. My father addressed Ryan and Ethan. "David won't be the first, but he'll be the last." "I would have handled the first one differently." "That's not true," Ethan said. "Mom denied everything until we showed her the video." "You don't understand," my mother interjected. "Ever wondered why your father and Uncle Daniel hadn't spoken until recently? They made amends Sunday night. Daniel admitted that your father didn't deserve what happened, but David did." Emotions were high as I relayed the news about their reconciliation. I put the kettle on while my children processed their mother's actions. Their reactions would influence how they dealt with things moving forward. The boys decided to head home, leaving the kettle to boil. With Emma in bed, I seized the opportunity to talk with my parents. "Mom warned me, they'll be watching you. How you handle this will guide them." "I understand, Mom," I replied. "I'll stay calm and let the lawyers handle everything. I can't change the past. I can only control what happens next." "That's a sensible approach," my father said. "But remember, Samantha isn't worth risking jail time." "I agree," I said, echoing Daniel's sentiment. My father looked proud. "You're a better man than I ever was. Your mother and I raised you well." At the lawyer's office, I explained the situation in detail. Her interest piqued when I mentioned my wife's employer. "Did you know I once worked there?" she asked. "They have a strict code of ethics. We might consider adding a lawsuit against the firm for breach of their policies." "Let's do it," I agreed. They're expected back on Thursday's earliest flight from St. Louis. After paying her fee, she expressed anticipation. Reflecting on it, I felt like David against Goliath. The company my wife worked for was a major player in the area, with 4 divisions. My family doctor was surprised when I requested STI tests but agreed it was prudent. Unknown to me, Ryan had informed his mother about the tests. He explained that the uncertainties about other partners persisted because of Uncle Daniel and David Richardson. Even though his mother wasn't around, Ryan reassured her not to worry, citing her history of deceit. "Mom, it's best to wait before explaining everything," he advised, wary of potential lies. Meanwhile, the company my wife worked for faced fines while they were away. My attorney pursued a $10 million settlement, highlighting the partners' dismissal as an admission of guilt. When they returned, the couple faced procedural issues, with my wife taking a taxi home alone. A doctor's call revealed I had a mild STD, which required disclosure. Samantha was compelled to reveal her past. The lawsuit made headlines at 6 p.m., exposing their actions. I updated Emma during her classes, which led her to inform her brothers. That evening, my dinner plans coincided with Emma's playful comments about my date. Rachel greeted me warmly at Red Lobster, both of us dressed casually. "Rachel is quite impressed with you," she chuckled. "My dad thinks you're a rock star." "If that doesn't humble David, nothing will." "The lawyer I hired sees this as a chance for revenge," I explained. "She's using her HR background to sue them for policy breaches." "I can't wait to see their faces tomorrow." Rachel handed me an envelope. "Inside are statements from 5 of David's former subordinates," she said. "They detail how he coerced them into satisfying his desires." "This strengthens my case," I said. "Originally, we thought winning enough to cover her fees would be success, but this could reveal a broader pattern of misconduct." Rachel and I bonded over our shared experiences, forming a new friendship. As I returned home close to midnight, I reflected on the chaos that had unfolded since Samantha's departure. While making tea, I noticed Emma's tears and made a cup for her as well. "It's okay to let it out," I told her. "Crying is part of the healing process." "I'm surprised you've held it together this long," I said, comforting her. She hugged me tightly, letting her emotions flow. I held her until she calmed down, hoping that this was a step toward healing for both of us. By the time we finished our tea, Emma had regained her composure. She was curious about my dinner with Rachel and asked what it was about. I explained that it had been a positive meeting and that Rachel and I seemed to be forming a meaningful connection. Emma had more questions about her, which I answered as best I could. At lunchtime on Friday, I dropped off the statements at my lawyer's office. Later, she suggested that we consider turning it into a class action lawsuit to seek greater compensation for all the women affected. I agreed and wished her luck. I heard from a friend that Samantha and David had a tough day despite their supposed victory. There was no celebration or acknowledgement of their settlement. The support I received from my colleagues and senior management was uplifting. On my way home, I withdrew $1,000 in cash and gave it to my mother. She gave me a knowing look that only a mother could muster. "It's a contribution to cover your extra expenses while we're here," I explained. "It would have cost me much more elsewhere." She seemed like she wanted to say something, so I waited. "This is a one-time thing, agreed?" I asked. She nodded, and I was grateful for her understanding. Samantha returned home to an empty house, feeling like an outcast after a day of hostility. Both she and David had become pariahs. Mark and his lawyer were suing the entire firm, a move that put them at a significant disadvantage. Samantha couldn't understand how Mark had managed to find a former employee to represent him, someone who was intimately familiar with all the legal maneuvers. After fixing herself a rye cocktail, Samantha sat down to read the divorce petition. She realized that Mark and their daughter were aware of their plans when they left together. Now she had to face the reality of her broken marriage. Feeling remorseful, she sent messages to Mark and their daughter, hoping to buy some time until Mark calmed down and maybe talk things over. Ryan's words echoed in her mind. Her actions now seemed deceitful to everyone, and the pain she was causing wasn't worth it. While checking the mail, she found a letter from the county health department revealing that I had contracted an STD. Overwhelmed by this revelation, she broke down in tears. The nightmare only deepened with the realization of past encounters on business trips, leaving her family with a poor view of her. Meanwhile, David Richardson was brooding in a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town, nursing his sorrows over Rachel filing for divorce. He didn't notice a man sitting beside him until a commotion erupted nearby. A fight broke out, and amidst the chaos, David was struck 3 times in the face. The assailant's words reflected Mark's anger and resentment. On Saturday afternoon, I struggled to address the situation with my eldest son, Ryan, while working in my father's barn. After comforting his distraught mother, Ryan insisted I reconcile with Samantha for the sake of family peace, despite the upheaval she had caused. I listened patiently as he expressed his thoughts. "Ryan, imagine if you were married and discovered your wife was cheating on you. Would you still offer the same advice?" I asked. His silence spoke volumes. "You suggest I accept being with someone who's unfaithful. Does that mean you see me as insignificant?" His shocked expression showed he was beginning to understand. "If you can't respect my choices, don't come back," I said firmly. With that, I left him to reflect. His youthful impulsiveness mirrored my own past mistakes, and now he was facing the consequences. Ryan sought counsel from Uncle Daniel, who related his own youthful mistakes. "Ryan, your mother pursued me," Daniel disclosed. "I fell in love, and it led to 18 years of separation from your father. There are always 2 sides to every story. Your dad is right. Your mother didn't get the STD from David, she brought it home. After all he did for the family, this was how she repaid him. Fix this or risk losing your father forever," Daniel warned. She had her chance with me, but her actions show she's learned nothing. On Monday morning, Samantha and David's firm was back in high spirits. My lawsuit had been dropped, and they were celebrated for their successful settlements. Despite his injuries, David pushed through and privately shared his ordeal with Samantha. As I left the nursing home, I spotted Samantha by my car, looking exhausted and disheveled. I approached cautiously. "Back off," she demanded. "David's got his own problems now, thanks to you." "I honestly don't know what you're talking about," I replied. "He got attacked," Samantha insisted. "The guy said he's your friend and will keep doing it." I couldn't help but laugh, finding it oddly satisfying. Once I regained my composure, I said, "If I knew who did it, I'd buy them a drink. Your lover really got off easy. If it had been up to me, he'd be a goner." Then, Rachel's urgent text arrived, demanding I come immediately. A second message followed with her address. I shot back a quick reply, saying I was on my way. "You're colder and more ruthless than I've ever seen," Samantha said. "That's it. Get your lawyer. Let's finalize this divorce." Without another word, I drove away, fed up with her deceit and self-righteousness. When I arrived, Rachel looked troubled. "What's wrong?" I asked, approaching her. "How can I assist? Your dad's friend had David beaten up, using your name," Rachel disclosed. My grin said everything, bringing visible relief to her expression. "Aren't you upset or concerned?" she asked, still relieved. "I wish I knew where he lives so I could send him a thank you whiskey," I said, briefly hugging Rachel, who didn't pull away. Reluctantly, I let her go, but before I could apologize, she surprised me with a kiss on the cheek. "They're inside and want to talk things over with you," Rachel said, leading me to the kitchen while holding my hand. I saw her daughters peeking out from a bedroom and winked at them. They returned the gesture. Rachel's father, who was a bit younger than mine, earned my respect. When I saw the large African-American man, I smiled and said, "If you were of legal drinking age, I'd send you a hefty bottle of whiskey as thanks." I extended my hand, which he shook, adding, "Think carefully before doing anything reckless." My father's advice spared me from trouble at your age. With the tension eased, formal introductions were made. Soon, it was time for him to take the young man home, leaving Rachel, her 2 children, and me behind. The girls, Sophia, 10, and Isabella, 8, introduced themselves and mentioned their favorite spot, an all-you-can-eat pizza place called Zizzy's. Kneeling down, I asked, "Would you ladies like me to treat you and your mom to dinner there?" They immediately agreed, probably influenced by my casual attire without a tie. "I just need to call my mom to let her know I won't be home for dinner," I told the girls. "Why?" they asked, curious. To keep her informed, I chuckled, dialing her number. They found it amusing until we reached Zizzy's. Rachel and I walked in, with the girls darting ahead. As we settled at a table, Rachel's colleagues noticed her. While she went for more pizza, one of them approached her. "Are you Mom's boyfriend?" Sophia asked. "I'm just a friend," I clarified, unsure of what was coming next. "Did you two go on a date?" Sophia pressed. "Not yet, but I'd need permission from someone special," I joked. "Who?" Isabella asked. "From you and your sister," I replied, which made them laugh. "You can, because Mom already says she likes you," they shared. When Rachel rejoined us and saw us in high spirits, she got more food. Isabella then joined me, expressing a desire for dessert. After we returned to their house, I thanked them at the door, and as it opened, they rushed inside, ready for bed. Feeling unsure about dating, I decided it was best to say goodbye. As I was leaving, Rachel called out to me. Turning back, we met on the steps. She surprised me with a kiss, which I returned. "My daughter mentioned you were going to ask me out," Rachel said. "Sophia got it wrong," I explained, recounting what happened while she was busy with a colleague. We sat on the porch, talking like teenagers, admitting our mutual interest but also our worries about the future. With September winding down, we planned to take the girls to the town fair the next Saturday before deciding what to do next. It was almost 10 o'clock when I got to my parents' farm. Emma immediately noticed my cheerful mood. "Dad's got a big smile," Emma observed. The meeting must have been important for him to be so happy. I updated my parents and daughter on the day's events. Dad found it funny that Samantha asked me to back off from David due to his issues. On Friday, my lawyer filed a new lawsuit against the firm, naming 4 senior partners and 16 female victims, all jointly charged. The lawsuit was hand-delivered to the partners' homes, causing 3 of them to be banned from returning by their spouses. Karen Mitchell continued trying to get Samantha's divorce lawyer's name. Mom emailed many of Samantha's relatives, letting them know about the lawsuit and revealing that this wasn't Samantha's first affair during business trips, also mentioning Mark's STD diagnosis. I was about to head out to pick up Rachel and the kids when Emma said, "You're really into Rachel, aren't you, Dad? I've noticed that since the divorce started, many of the friends your mom and I had have drifted away," I explained. Rachel and I bonded over similar experiences, which made it easy to trust each other. It's too soon to predict where this will go, but I'm open to exploring it. If you need dating tips, just ask, Emma offered with a grin. Just promise to introduce us before things get serious. It turned out Rachel was afraid of heights, so I spent an hour on the Ferris wheel with her daughters, which they enjoyed. We went with the flow and savored the moment. Feeling hungry, we headed to the food area, with Isabella perched on my shoulders. While waiting in line, my brother Daniel and his wife found us with their kids. After we introduced ourselves, we all sat down to eat. The kids got along great, leaving the adults to follow suit. After spending a fortune on rides, Laura and Daniel decided to host a family gathering on Sunday, extending an invitation to Rachel and her children. Rachel agreed to come, but her daughters would be with their father for the first time since his return from New York. By 6 p.m., the kids were utterly spent. After a bath and bedtime routine, Rachel received a call from David. He was stuck in the emergency room and unable to pick up the children because he'd been punched again. Rachel reassured him that it wasn't Samantha's husband, as he had spent the day at the fair with me and the kids. David wasn't too thrilled about it. I reluctantly left Rachel's place around 9 p.m., knowing we'd start our relationship the next day. I picked up Rachel and her daughters at 2 p.m. the following Sunday and drove to my brother's house, where everyone had gathered, Emma and her date, my parents, and Daniel's family. It was a special occasion for my brother, having me in his home for the first time since his marriage. Laura greeted Rachel and her daughters warmly, and they were quickly made to feel at home. Things took a turn when my oldest son suggested we step aside for a private chat. We moved to a quieter spot on the edge of Daniel's property. "Dad, I messed up," Ryan admitted. "I fell for Mom's manipulation. She tricked me. Uncle Daniel and my colleagues filled me in last week. What did you learn from all this?" I asked. "When it comes to family," Ryan said, "sometimes it's better to keep your distance. No matter what you do, you might just end up making things worse. They need to figure it out on their own terms." "You're right, but it's hard because we care so much," I said. "Your mom and I will have a conversation eventually, but it won't be any time soon given how she's behaved." "Her behavior?" Ryan repeated. "Yes," I replied. "Her actions speak louder than words. Take Rachel, for example. She endured a loveless marriage until she was ready to raise her daughters on her own. She showed remarkable patience until the timing was right. Her behavior reveals her true character. Your mom's actions were cruel and shocking. Despite her words, her actions often tell a different story. As Grandpa used to say," I added, "if I'm not worth the truth, then you're not worth lying to." "That's a tough question, Dad," Ryan said sadly. "What else did she lie about?" "That's something we might never fully know," I answered. "There's no point dwelling on the past. All we can do is learn from it and move forward." "I'm really impressed by Rachel, Dad," Ryan said. "But the more I hear about David and Mom, the more I think they're actually meant for each other." Emma came over and said, "Your conversation is drawing some attention. Maybe we should continue this later." "We're done here, sis," Ryan assured her. I just needed to apologize to Dad. With that, he walked away, leaving Emma looking curious. "It's just a case of saying the wrong thing," I explained. "It's good to see he's taking responsibility for it." Daniel and Laura put on a wonderful dinner. Laura captured several moments with her camera, especially when Isabella was keeping a watchful eye on me. When the water fight started, I eagerly joined in, though it ended with me completely soaked. As I rested in a lounge chair to dry off, Isabella climbed into my lap and fell asleep. Meanwhile, I noticed Laura and Rachel discussing the budding connection between me and her daughters. My father joined me and said, "This little one seems to have taken a liking to you. Just make sure that revenge on David isn't your driving force." I recounted the journey of our relationship since Rachel's initial call. He nodded, understanding that I should have trusted my instincts. "Your mother asked to speak with you," he said. "Whatever path you choose, remember that you have our support, Dad." "Look at our society," I said. A staunch Democrat, reminiscent of JFK, switches parties and wins the presidency, while conservative Congress members step aside. The GOP now reflects Kennedy's views, but the media attacks him, branding him a traitor to democratic values. Despite his consistency, public perception shifts. He remains a Kennedy Democrat, but they're trying to impeach him for alleged wrongdoing, while supporting a candidate who admits to similar actions. What's the message here? They have the same disregard for truth, honesty, and morality as my soon-to-be ex-wife, I replied. To them, anyone who doesn't conform to the new Democratic agenda is worthless. Values only matter when they're behind bars, then they pretend to regret it. Dad chuckled and said, "People should flush 100% of media and social network truths down the toilet." Finding honesty in real life is tough, but many are too dense to grasp that. It's astounding to see two factions of Democrats at odds. This truth reveals a lot. And considering his impressive achievements despite fierce opposition, I wonder if their animosity stems from his competence overshadowing their failures. Most seeking re-election boast years in office without meaningful progress. Strong words, Mark, Dad remarked. It underscores the media's role as a propaganda tool. On Monday, while I was in my office, a detective came by to discuss the ongoing issue with David Richardson. I spent about an hour explaining what I knew and providing a list of women whose spouses had discovered David's affairs with their wives. "Officer, you should reach out to Karen Mitchell for the list," I suggested. "It's been over 6 weeks since I first learned about their relationship." Rachel, David's wife, contacted me to update me on their plans. "It's been at least 4 weeks since their romantic trip. I first met David's wife while he was in New York with my wife. Since then, his soon-to-be ex-wife and I have grown closer, evolving our relationship into something we're still trying to understand." "It certainly paints a different picture," the detective remarked. "David Richardson seems to be pointing the finger at you for wrecking his marriage, when in reality, it's his own actions that are to blame. He's the type who shifts blame rather than accepting responsibility." After our conversation, I called Karen to update her. She had anticipated this reaction. "David's the kind of person who sets others up," she said. "I believe he's behind my dismissal from the firm." Karen also informed me that my wife had finally hired a lawyer. When I got home to my parents' place, I learned that it was my mother's letter that had pushed Samantha to give up. Up until then, she still believed there was a chance to salvage our marriage. Once I had time to reflect, it became clear that Samantha probably thought I sent the letter out of spite. On Wednesday, Emma and I took Rachel and her daughters to Olive Garden for dinner, where my sons also joined us. During the meal, I mentioned that Samantha had finally engaged a lawyer for her divorce. Rachel's daughters seemed to be quite taken with Emma, who enjoyed the attention. Overall, Rachel and I felt the dinner was a success. 2 months had passed since our last family gathering. On Friday afternoon, I found myself waiting alongside Karen Mitchell to be called before Judge Robert Harris. Across the hall, my soon-to-be ex-wife and her lawyer, from the same firm, sat waiting. We had agreed on the division of property, with no mortgage on the house. It was straightforward. Samantha agreed to buy my share of the house based on its current appraisal and to split our joint savings. When it was our turn, we confirmed our agreement, finalizing the divorce. As I was heading to the parking lot, Samantha stopped me on the front steps. "I've ruined everything," she said. "I've finally admitted my behavior to our sons. Emma won't speak to me because she thinks I acted intentionally. I wish I had realized sooner what kind of message I was sending. I would accept that from our daughter due to her inexperience, but from an adult, it sounds disingenuous." "Rachel's divorce was finalized," I said. "She got everything she could from David. He's now paying $1,000 a month in child support, $500 for each child until they turn 18, and half of their post-secondary education costs. Their house is to be sold, with the proceeds split evenly. For some reason, David left the company and relocated to start a new business in another city. It seems the frequent brawls took a toll on him. With his share of the company, he's financially secure for life." My parents had invited Rachel and her daughters over for dinner, but they also extended the invitation to her parents. Given my developing relationship with Rachel, they felt it was time to meet her family, just in case things got serious. Karen Mitchell had been negotiating with the insurance company responsible for the firm's liability, and it looked like we would settle out of court. After paying her 30% share, we ended up with over $750,000. We gathered around Mom's formal dining room table, which hadn't been used in years, just relaxing after a large meal. As I stood up, I pushed back my chair and got down on one knee. Pulling out the ring box, I asked, "Rachel, will you give us a second chance and marry me?" Rachel, stunned, said yes. That's when the real celebration began. Mom had to call Daniel and Laura and my 2 sons to share the joyous news. They arrived within half an hour. Amid the excitement, I noticed Isabella was crying. I went over to her, and she climbed into my lap as she sat on the floor. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked softly. "Nothing. I'm just happy you're going to be my dad," Isabella said. I looked at Rachel, who had tears in her eyes, and I think she could see my own. Holding Isabella, I walked over to Rachel. Everyone sensed the significance of this moment of closeness. Sophia came over and stood next to us. "Dad," Sophia asked, "when you and Mom get married, will we take your last name?" "As soon as the court allows," I replied. "Sophia and Isabella," my father said, "from now on, you can call us grandparents." Okay, I was thinking about how much time my new daughters would spend with my parents. They were looking forward to their time on the farm, and my father would teach them to ride horses in no time. Later, in private, Rachel asked how I planned to persuade David Richardson to allow me to adopt his daughters and change their last name. "Leave that to me," I said. We then began our earnest search for a home, planning for Rachel and the girls to move in before our wedding. About a month later, I showed up unannounced at David Richardson's office. His secretary let me in. I closed the door behind me. David's face had started to heal, but he looked quite different. He had been punched 8 times. The detective had interviewed all his former lovers and their spouses but had no solid leads on suspects that I decided to confront David, despite the risk that he might genuinely believe I was behind his injuries. "You might have heard that Rachel and I are getting married," I said, waiting for him to look up. His face turned pale as he glanced my way, clearly connecting me with his bruised condition. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I need your permission," I replied. "I need a legal document that allows me to adopt your daughters so they can take my last name. This isn't just my wish, it's what Sophia wants too. She asked both her mother and me if she and her sister could have my last name. We need this document to officially recognize me as their father and to change their last name to mine." "Why should I agree to this?" he challenged. "This will remove you from our lives for good," I said. "If you don't agree, we'll be crossing paths regularly." It took him about half an hour to draft and print the document I requested. I knew he was indifferent about his daughters, given that he hadn't seen them since leaving for New York. His secretary, who was also a notary, certified and stamped the document. According to Rachel, David had only married her because she was pregnant, and his family had pressured him into proposing when they found out. I arrived at Rachel's school just as her kindergarten class was being dismissed. I had to go to the office since they didn't know me there. I asked one of the staff to call Rachel to the office. She looked surprised when she saw me. "Rachel, I made a promise to your daughters when we got engaged," I said, handing her the envelope from my jacket pocket. "I think this will help us fulfill that promise." She took the envelope, opened it, and read the document inside. "How?" she asked, her eyes welling up with tears. "David still thinks I'm responsible for his injuries," I explained. "I used his fear to our advantage to get this for us. I thought we could arrange it so that Sophia and Isabella can legally take my last name on our wedding day." Emma had told me on the night of our engagement that Rachel always keeps her word, especially in front of children. "Do you think Karen Mitchell will handle the adoption papers and file them in court?" I asked. "I'll call her office," Rachel replied, pulling out her cell phone. "The secretary should be able to help us set up an appointment." The office secretary, who overheard our conversation, asked, "Rachel, have you set a date?" "No," Rachel said. "I wanted to, but Mark said he wouldn't until he figured out a way to convince David to let him adopt my daughters. He felt if we were going to be a family, the kids should get what they want when we exchange our vows." We managed to meet with Karen later that afternoon. She was thrilled for us and quickly prepared the necessary documents, complete with the notary statement. They were due to be filed in court by the end of the day. It took a week before we got confirmation that the adoption and the name change were approved. They only needed to know when it would take effect. To sort this out, we planned a family meeting. We scheduled it for Sunday, as the movers would still be busy transporting Rachel's and the kids' belongings to our new home during the week. The following morning, while Rachel and I were at work, a detective investigating the attacks on David Richardson came to inform us that 2 arrests had been made. One was a senior partner from David's firm with whom he'd had an affair, and the other was an African-American man who still believed they were in a relationship. On Sunday, my brother Daniel and his wife met us at the gathering. We were the last to arrive, bringing a huge pot of Boston baked beans that Rachel had prepared. It was a potluck brunch. After the initial greetings, my future father-in-law asked, "What's new?" "We have some exciting news," I said. "In 2 weeks, 6 days before Christmas, Rachel and I will be exchanging vows. And the adoption of Sophia and Isabella will be finalized. All 3 will take the name Walker. We're planning our honeymoon for next summer with the girls, either at Disneyland or Disney World." There was a buzz of excitement, and in a quiet moment, Sophia came over and sat on my lap. "Thank you, Dad," she said softly. "For what?" I asked, touched. "Because you love us enough to keep your word," she replied. Her heartfelt words left me speechless. I simply gathered her into my arms and hugged her tightly, overwhelmed by her sincerity.